The room buzzed with the usual tension of a high-profile political debate, cameras clicking, phones recording, the world watching. Then Bill Clinton leaned forward, a smirk curling on his lips, eyes sharp and calculating, and unleashed a mocking jab that echoed across the chamber. His tone was not subtle. It was sharp, condescending, the kind of verbal swipe meant to undermine in seconds. Jasmine Crockett's expression didn't change at first. She tilted her head slightly, absorbing the weight of his words. The audience, caught between disbelief and anticipation, collectively held its breath. For a moment it felt like time had slowed. Clinton's voice, usually commanding rooms, now hovered in a vacuum, hitting ears but failing to land with the intended impact. The arrogance in his mockery was palpable, a display of power attempting to intimidate, but something in Crockett's calm presence hinted this confrontation was far from over. Cameras captured every subtle shift. A raised eyebrow from Crockett, a tightening of lips, her fingers brushing the edge of her notes with deliberate precision. Social media watchers in real time began to sense the tension, fingers pausing mid-scroll, eyes widening. Did she just let that slide? Some thought. But the question that gripped everyone was larger, heavier. What could she possibly say next that would leave one of America's most seasoned political figures frozen? The chamber seemed to shrink around them. For 5 seconds, the world held its breath. The spectators, the press, even Clinton himself. The room was suspended in a cinematic pause that no one had anticipated. Every eye was on Crockett. Every thought wondered, would she counter? Would she fold? The suspense was unbearable, a silent drumbeat echoing through the walls. And then, the camera caught a subtle movement. Crockett reaching for something, almost imperceptible, yet charged with intention. The smirk on Clinton's face faltered just slightly, as if sensing the storm he had just provoked. It was a tiny crack in his armor, almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. The stage was set. The world waited. And in that pregnant pause, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary debate. This was a test of composure against mockery, of dignity against arrogance. What she read next, what she chose to reveal, would leave Clinton, and everyone watching, utterly stunned. The room held its breath. The nation leaned in, and the moment of reckoning had only just begun. The tension didn't dissipate after Clinton's jab. It intensified. This was more than a verbal sparring match. On one side stood a former president, a symbol of political mastery, decades of influence, and the polished confidence that comes from commanding rooms for generations. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, a rising Congresswoman whose name had been quietly gaining respect among progressives, immigrant communities, and advocates for justice. The disparity in experience and stature was stark. The stakes were monumental. For Crockett, this was not just about responding to a taunt. Every word she spoke carried the weight of representation, the responsibility of showing millions, especially those who had been historically silenced, that courage and dignity could still confront power without bowing. The nation wasn't just watching a debate. It was witnessing a microcosm of democracy itself. Could truth and composure hold their ground against mockery and authority? Could integrity stand firm when arrogance sought to dominate? The audience could feel it. Whispers spread through the chamber. Reporters exchanged glances, realizing that this exchange might define more than a single moment on live television. It could become a viral symbol of accountability, of the unyielding voice against condescension. Social media chatter began before Crockett even spoke again, speculation buzzing. Will she retaliate? Will she let it slide? Every follower, every voter, every viewer suddenly had a vested interest in what would happen next. And then there was the power imbalance itself. Clinton's reputation was legendary. He had mastered the art of deflection, charm, and control over any room he entered. His smirk carried decades of experience in debates, interviews, and public appearances, the subtle ability to intimidate without raising a hand. Facing him, Crockett could have faltered. She could have allowed the weight of history, expectation, and sheer fame to unsettle her. But she didn't. Her calmness, poised yet fiery beneath the surface, was a signal that this encounter would be about more than personalities. It would be about principles. The chamber felt alive with anticipation. Each sentence, each gesture, each silent pause carried a charge. The world outside, glued to screens, felt the suspense as if they were in that very room. The public, long conditioned to watch the powerful mock the lesser known, now found themselves on the edge of disbelief. Could one determined voice truly stand unshaken against an icon? Crockett's reputation preceded her, though. Known for measured, calculated comebacks, she had built a career turning underestimation into leverage, transforming condescension into opportunities for moral clarity and legal precision. Those who knew her expected fire. Those unfamiliar underestimated it. This was the tipping point, the moment where history might remember her poise, or where arrogance might silence her forever. And in the charged silence that stretched longer than any sentence spoken, one thought dominated the room. Whatever Crockett was about to do next, it wasn't just for herself. It was a demonstration of resilience, a statement to the nation that dignity, truth, and courage could confront even the most daunting figure in politics. The anticipation was electric, the suspense unbearable. Every eye waited, every heart pounded. And everyone, everywhere, wondered, how will Jasmine Crockett respond to Bill Clinton's mockery? The answer, when it came, would shock more than just a former president. It would shock the world. Bill Clinton entered the debate hall with the kind of confidence that only decades in the political spotlight can cultivate. His presence alone commanded attention, an aura shaped by years as governor, then president, seasoned in the theater of power, schooled in the art of persuasion, charm, and strategic dominance. Every word he spoke carried weight, every glance hinted at authority, and every gesture was calculated to impress or intimidate. For many, he was the embodiment of political mastery, a figure whose experience seemed untouchable, almost mythic. Yet beneath the polished veneer lay contradictions that were easy to overlook, but impossible to ignore for those watching closely. Clinton's charm had always been a double-edged sword, disarming to some, condescending to others. History had documented moments when charisma overshadowed accountability, when confidence veered into arrogance, and when the gloss of public favor masked selective outrage or strategic silence. To those attuned to the subtle cues, the same smooth smile that could soothe a room could also dismiss or belittle with the flick of an eyebrow. In this confrontation, Clinton's reputation became both armor and vulnerability. The world had long seen him as the untouchable arbiter of political discourse, a man capable of turning conversation on its head with wit or diversion. But arrogance, even subtle, has a way of inviting challenge, and history had shown that untested authority can crack under the pressure of unflinching truth. He had never faced a Crockett in this particular arena, someone whose calm precision and moral clarity could turn mockery into a reflection of hubris. Every observer in the chamber sensed it. Clinton's mockery was not just playful banter, it was a calculated attempt to assert dominance, to remind the audience of who held historical and cultural weight. Yet even as he leaned into the performance, there were glimpses of tension in micro-expressions, a brief tightening around the eyes, the faint stiffening of posture. It was the subtle sign that, for the first time in years, he might be confronted with a challenge that could not be deflected by experience alone. To frame him as a villain is not to caricature, but to illuminate the natural tension of power dynamics. Clinton represented entrenched authority, a seasoned figure who could wield influence effortlessly, yet whose reliance on charm and legacy made him susceptible to disruption. His mockery, while sharp, was also predictable, a test he believed any rising politician would falter under. And in many ways, the audience knew this. The stage was set for a collision between old mastery and emerging conviction. Every anecdote of his political life, every headline from decades past, reinforced the aura of unassailable dominance. But history had also shown cracks, moments where perception collided with reality, and the powerful were forced to confront authenticity. It was in these moments, when the untouchable faces the unshakable, that true drama unfolds. Clinton, seasoned and confident, now stood on that precipice. His smirk, rehearsed and deliberate, masked the stakes, but those who looked closely could sense the shift. A storm was approaching, one his experience alone might not weather. In the silent anticipation of the chamber, viewers felt it too, the clash of experience against conviction, of inherited authority against earned respect. Clinton's long-standing dominance was about to be tested, not by insult or debate skill alone, but by a force that combined moral clarity, precision, and unyielding composure. For the first time in this encounter, the untouchable figure faced uncertainty. a reality that would not only define this moment, but ripple far beyond the chamber walls. The stage was perfectly set. The veteran politician, seasoned by decades, confronted a rising figure whose presence demanded acknowledgement, whose resolve threatened to expose arrogance, and whose voice promised to turn mockery into a mirror. Clinton's dominance was absolute, until Crockett chose to speak. Jasmine Crockett's rise to prominence was never scripted for simplicity or ease. She came from a world where voices like hers were often underestimated, overlooked, or silenced. From the earliest days of her career, she had learned the power of preparation, the necessity of discipline, and the unshakable value of integrity. As a lawyer, she had defended the marginalized, championed causes others deemed too complex or controversial, and faced condescension with a measured composure that masked the fire within. Every courtroom, every legislative session, every public appearance became a lesson in resilience. Her path was forged through adversity. As a young attorney, Crockett often encountered colleagues and opponents who assumed she lacked the experience, the authority, or the knowledge to challenge their assertions. She was underestimated, dismissed, and occasionally mocked. Yet each slight, each underestimation, became a catalyst. She turned prejudice into preparation, bias into strategy, and doubt into fuel. The lessons she learned weren't just about winning arguments. They were about standing firmly in truth, holding her ground when power tried to bend her, and using every obstacle as a platform for moral clarity. Crockett's reputation had begun to precede her in political circles. Known for combining sharp legal intellect with unyielding moral conviction, she had built a career on the principle that dignity could speak louder than intimidation. She understood that true influence was not wielded through volume or spectacle, but through precision, consistency, and unwavering adherence to principle. Each policy debate, each legislative maneuver, each public defense of the underrepresented contributed to a growing narrative. Crockett was not just capable, she was formidable. Her personal story added depth to her public persona. She understood sacrifice, the late nights, the relentless scrutiny, the social pressures, and the internal doubts. She had faced condescension not as an abstract concept, but as lived reality, transforming it into a source of empathy for those similarly overlooked. Crockett's ability to remain poised under pressure wasn't accidental. It was cultivated through years of navigating spaces where being underestimated was the default assumption. These experiences honed not only her intellect but her emotional resilience, her ability to connect with audiences, and her understanding of the symbolic power of every statement she made. Crockett's journey was a study in contrasts, grace under fire, intellect married to empathy, quiet determination that could explode into unforgettable clarity when provoked. Her career had trained her for this precise moment, an encounter with someone whose public persona was built on authority, reputation, and decades of unchallenged influence. Every past confrontation, every moment of being underestimated, every strategic victory or carefully measured response had prepared her for this stage. The anticipation was more than professional. It was personal. Crockett understood the stakes weren't merely about one debate or one insult. They were about demonstrating to a watching nation that dignity could withstand arrogance, that preparedness could meet mockery, and that a principled voice could challenge even the most experienced figures in the room. She wasn't just defending herself. She was representing all who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or underestimated. In the quiet moments before she responded, Crockett's calm exterior concealed the full measure of her preparation. Each breath, each glance at Clinton, each slight adjustment of notes or posture carried decades of training and personal history. She had faced skepticism before, but never like this, a living symbol of entrenched authority, smirking and testing her resolve. Yet every scar, every trial, every hard-won lesson converged at this exact point. This was her crucible. Every struggle had been practiced for the exact challenge she now faced. And as the chamber held its collective breath, the tension thickening with every passing second, one truth was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett was uniquely prepared to confront mockery, command attention, and transform a moment of potential intimidation into a display of unassailable dignity. When she finally spoke, it wouldn't just be a rebuttal. It would be a statement of identity, of resilience, of moral authority. The nation, the audience, and even Clinton himself would soon understand that Crockett's path had forged not just a politician, but a force, calm, precise, and unstoppable. This encounter would mark a turning point, not only for the debate itself, but for the enduring narrative of courage meeting power on equal footing. The room crackled with tension as Clinton leaned forward, voice sharp, eyes narrowing. Each word dripped with mockery, calculated to unsettle, to provoke a reaction that would make the audience doubt Crockett's authority. Yet she remained composed, her posture steady, her gaze unwavering. The contrast was immediate and cinematic. The seasoned politician, red-faced and aggressive, against the rising force of a calm, unshakable lawmaker. Every pause, every syllable, became a battlefield, a duel played out not with fists, but with intellect and presence. Clinton's jabs escalated, a relentless barrage designed to dominate the narrative. He questioned her experience, her judgment, even her ability to stand toe-to-toe with someone of his stature. The chamber seemed to shrink with each insult, the air thick with anticipation. Spectators leaned in, whispers threading through the crowd as if the walls themselves were listening. The tension was palpable, a living entity. Every eye in the room tracked Crockett, expecting some flicker of uncertainty, but there was none. Her silence, deliberate and controlled, only amplified the suspense, forcing Clinton to confront the uncomfortable reality. Mockery alone would not bend her. Cinematic beats punctuated the confrontation. A raised eyebrow from Clinton, a subtle nod from Crockett to herself, the brief shifting of papers, the hushed intake of collective breath from the audience, each movement loaded with meaning. It was a chess game where the stakes were reputation, perception, and the moral authority each figure wielded. The more Clinton pressed, the more his veneer of dominance began to show cracks, subtle, yet undeniable. His gestures grew sharper, less controlled. His tone edged with impatience. Crockett, by contrast, exuded a quiet intensity, a controlled energy that hinted at the storm yet to come. The dialogue became a masterclass in tension. Every question from Clinton carried implied superiority, every rebuttal a chance to undermine. But Crockett's strategic patience reframed the confrontation. She didn't respond immediately, forcing the audience to dwell on each word, each insult, each challenge. In those pregnant pauses, she communicated something more profound than a verbal defense. She conveyed resilience, moral clarity, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Clinton, despite decades of experience, found himself navigating uncharted territory. An opponent who refused the expected reactions, who wielded silence and composure as tools of power. Audience reactions rippled through the chamber. Gasps, stifled murmurs, eyes widening in disbelief as Crockett's presence refused to be diminished. Even Clinton's allies shifted, sensing the imbalance. The debate, initially framed as a simple exchange, was evolving into a spectacle of psychological tension, a clash between arrogance and steadfastness, mockery and poise, experience and unflinching integrity. As the verbal duel continued, the stakes mounted. Clinton's frustration became more evident, his attacks sharper but less effective. Crockett's calm precision began to dominate the narrative, forcing the chamber and the viewing public to recognize the dynamics at play. Every insult thrown her way became an opportunity to reveal character, every condescending remark a platform to demonstrate control. By the climax of this section, it was clear. This was no ordinary debate. It was a confrontation that would be remembered, dissected, and shared. The seasoned politician's attempts to intimidate were faltering, while Crockett's strategic restraint and moral authority positioned her not merely as a participant, but as the defining force of the exchange. The tension was at its peak, leaving everyone to wonder, how would she respond next? Crockett's moment arrived not with haste, but with deliberate, almost cinematic timing. The chamber had held its collective breath for what felt like an eternity. Clinton's relentless verbal assault had reached a crescendo, his voice echoing, his smirk faltering slightly under the weight of unyielding calm. The air was thick with anticipation, the audience poised on the edge of revelation. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her eyes scanning the room, measuring the precise impact of her words before they even left her lips. Then she spoke, not as a reaction, but as a declaration. Her voice was steady, resonant, carrying the authority of experience, intelligence, and unwavering conviction. She began by quoting directly from Clinton's own past speeches, selectively highlighting contradictions and moments where his public positions had clashed with his private actions. Each reference landed like a pinpoint strike, precise and unassailable, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The audience could feel the weight of history in her words. The deliberate uncovering of truth from the pages of a political career once considered untouchable. Crockett's counterattack was layered, a masterclass in rhetorical precision. Legal reasoning intertwined with moral authority, her points cascading logically yet with an emotional undercurrent that hit the heart of every listener. She didn't just respond. She exposed, she illuminated, she reframed the narrative. Clinton's own words, once weapons in his hand, were now instruments of his disarming. Each page she held aloft, each line she cited, carried both literal and symbolic weight. The embodiment of accountability, the echo of credibility wielded correctly, and the undeniable power of preparation. The visual tension was cinematic. Crockett's calm, composed exterior contrasted sharply with Clinton's gradual realization that he was no longer the controlling force in the room. Veins visibly tensed, eyes widened, lips parted in disbelief. Clinton's aura of dominance began to crumble under the careful precision of Crockett's dismantling. The audience watched, captivated, as the so-called master of political discourse was brought to a halt, frozen not by force but by the sharp, unwavering truth of her words. Social media erupted simultaneously, even as the moment unfolded. Imagined tweets and viral clips spread instantly. She did not miss. Clinton silenced by Crockett's truth. Unforgettable political clapback 2025. Memes began circulating within minutes, capturing freeze-frame moments of disbelief, hand gestures, and the sheer audacity of her poise. Allies praised her precision, critics begrudgingly acknowledged her effectiveness, and the public began to see her not merely as a politician, but as a symbol of dignity meeting power head-on. Crockett's pause between points was as telling as the words themselves. Each deliberate moment allowed her arguments to resonate, giving weight to the moral and intellectual clarity she presented. Clinton's attempts to interject were met with silence or subtle gestures, emphasizing that the floor belonged to her. It wasn't just a debate tactic, it was a demonstration of command, presence, and the strategic patience that years of preparation had honed. The emotional crescendo built with each citation, each factual reveal, and each moral framing. Crockett transformed the encounter into a spectacle of accountability and intelligence, making the confrontation about more than personalities. It became about principles. Her approach elevated the moment from a simple debate exchange to an unforgettable political and cultural lesson. Arrogance, even when cloaked in decades of experience, is vulnerable to truth, preparation, and unwavering composure. As the counterattack reached its peak, the room's energy shifted. Whispers became murmurs of awe, skeptical faces softened into acknowledgement, and the power dynamics had irreversibly changed. Clinton, once the aggressor, was now reacting defensively, recalculating, frozen in the glare of someone who refused to yield. The tension wasn't merely physical, it was psychological, emblematic of a broader struggle between established authority and rising integrity, between mockery and dignified response. By the time Crockett concluded, the effect was undeniable. Every audience member, every observer, and every potential viewer online could sense the magnitude of the moment. She had turned what could have been a damaging confrontation into an emblem of control, poise, and moral clarity. The narrative had shifted completely. This was no longer Clinton's stage. It was Crockett's triumph of preparation, intellect, and courage. The aftershocks were inevitable. In that frozen silence, the chamber, the viewers, and the nation recognized a simple yet profound truth. When dignity meets audacity, when preparation meets provocation, even the most powerful figures can be left speechless. And as the world held its collective breath, one question lingered. How far would the ripples of this mic-drop moment travel, and who would feel its impact next? The moment Crockett's words landed, the room didn't just react, it erupted. Murmurs swelled into astonished gasps. Eyes widened, and the chamber seemed to vibrate with the energy of an audience collectively recognizing a seismic shift. Clinton, the once commanding presence, remained frozen, the weight of Crockett's precision pressing down like a spotlight on his faltering composure. In that charged silence, The first wave of shockwaves began, and they didn't stay confined to the debate hall. They spilled into the world. Within minutes, social media ignited. Hashtags surged like wildfire. Yas Crockett Clapback, Left Frozen Clinton, Mick Drop Politics. Clips circulated instantly, edited to highlight her poised gestures, the deliberate turns of the page, the calm authority in her gaze. Comments poured in, admiration, disbelief, and viral praise. Allies lauded her foresight and preparation. Skeptics, initially prepared to mock, found themselves acknowledging her mastery. Unbelievable, read one viral tweet. She didn't just answer, she dismantled. Memes appeared, capturing every cinematic frame, the most potent ones immortalizing Clinton's stunned expression juxtaposed with Crockett's composed demeanor. The internet collectively witnessed what the live audience could hardly comprehend. A defining political moment that blurred the line between debate and spectacle. The ripple effect expanded quickly. Late-night hosts dissected the encounter, replaying her counterpoints, highlighting her strategic patience. Political pundits debated not just the substance of her words, but the symbolism of her presence, an emblem of resilience against established authority, a statement of dignity meeting provocation. Even mainstream commentators, often critical of progressive voices, conceded she had navigated an unprecedented confrontation with unparalleled poise. Her actions became shorthand for standing firm in the face of mockery, a viral lesson in composure and intellect. Community leaders and activists amplified the moment. Town halls buzzed with discussion, online forums erupted with analysis, and grassroots organizers framed Crockett as a modern archetype of courage and moral clarity. Her example inspired emerging leaders, students, and professionals navigating environments where arrogance often seeks to dominate. She was no longer just a congresswoman or a debater. She had become a symbol of what it meant to hold one's ground, to transform confrontation into an opportunity for clarity and truth. The cultural resonance extended beyond immediate political circles. Think pieces explored the historical significance, contrasting Crockett's methodical calm against decades of political bluster. Educational platforms dissected her rhetorical strategies, using the encounter as a masterclass in communication, moral authority, and the power of preparation. Even casual viewers were swept up by the cinematic drama. The juxtaposition of aggressive posturing and measured dignity created a story that was impossible to ignore. As the hours turned into days, the narrative solidified. Crockett's counterattack wasn't just a single victory. It became a defining reference point. Headlines framed it as a watershed moment, a young, determined leader facing an established political figure and emerging unshaken, reshaping the discourse. The debate had sparked more than fleeting shock. It had ignited reflection, conversation, and admiration across social media, traditional media, and civic spaces. By the end of this wave, one thing was clear. Crockett had transcended the debate stage. She had created a viral, unforgettable moment that would be dissected, referenced, and celebrated long after the chamber emptied. Her composure, intelligence, and courage had made her a symbol not just of political skill, but of a universal principle. Standing tall against arrogance leaves an indelible mark, one that reverberates far beyond the room, far beyond the immediate audience, shaping perceptions, inspiring action, and altering the narrative of power itself. The world was watching, sharing, talking, and reflecting. And in that collective observation, a simple truth emerged. When courage meets preparation, shockwaves aren't just immediate. They echo, ripple, and reshape the story of what leadership can look like in the modern era. As the dust of the confrontation settled, Crockett's impact was undeniable. What had started as a tense exchange had evolved into a defining lesson about power, integrity, and the courage to speak truth to authority. The spectacle of Clinton's attempted mockery and Crockett's poised counterattack became more than a viral moment. It crystallized a universal truth. Those who wield power with arrogance often fear authenticity, and dignity is the one language arrogance cannot silence. Crockett reframed the entire encounter with a subtle, yet powerful, moral clarity. Her response had not merely defended her position. It illuminated a deeper principle about accountability, ethics, and public service. By calmly exposing contradictions while maintaining grace, she demonstrated that the most potent power lies not in intimidation, but in truth, preparation, and unwavering composure. Every measured pause, every deliberate citation, reinforced a narrative where courage triumphs over bluster and reason prevails over mockery. The emotional resonance extended beyond political analysis. Viewers, activists, and citizens alike were inspired by her ability to transform confrontation into empowerment. In every corner of social media, the conversation shifted from partisan divides to shared admiration for the integrity she exemplified. Comments, shares, and discussions echoed a collective recognition. Moments like this redefine leadership, showing that authentic strength is rooted in dignity, not dominance. Crockett's poise became a beacon for those navigating personal and professional arenas where arrogance often seeks to dominate, proving that resilience and preparation can turn vulnerability into victory. The crescendo of the story was not just her public triumph, but the symbolic message it sent about the values of a nation. This wasn't merely Crockett versus Clinton. It was a moment that reflected a broader struggle over the principles society chooses to elevate. Every citizen watching could feel the stakes, a call to uphold truth, demand accountability, and cherish the courage to stand firm in the face of ridicule. Her example became a mirror for collective aspirations, an affirmation that standing tall against arrogance is a reflection of who we want to be as a people, as a democracy, and as a community united by justice. Crockett's handling of the confrontation left an indelible lesson in strategy, morality, and emotional intelligence. It showed that preparation, knowledge, and self-respect are the greatest tools in facing aggression. By keeping composure under intense pressure, she demonstrated that even the most intimidating figures can be disarmed with clarity, courage, and ethical conviction. Her performance reframed the narrative. Strength is measured not by volume or authority, but by the ability to act decisively while remaining principled. In the final analysis, the clash with Clinton became emblematic of a timeless truth. Dignity transcends insult. Authenticity overcomes arrogance, and courage inspires action. Crockett's words and demeanor transformed what could have been a fleeting viral moment into a lesson of lasting cultural and moral significance. As viewers absorbed her example, they were reminded that power may provoke, mock, and attempt to dominate. But the true measure of leadership lies in how one responds. And in that response, a nation was offered a simple yet profound vision: to choose integrity over intimidation, truth over pretense, and dignity over derision. The story concluded not with applause alone, but with a deep, resonant call to recognize the power within every individual to uphold these values. Crockett's confrontation with Clinton became a blueprint for courage, a cinematic lesson in resilience, and a reminder that the ultimate victory belongs to those who act with unwavering principle. The moment closed with quiet reflection in the minds of every observer, leaving one enduring message: in the face of arrogance, standing tall is not just resistance. It is the embodiment of the dignity that defines a nation. The debate was over, but the impact lingered. Clinton's mocking words had been met with Crockett's calm, precise, and unforgettable response, leaving him frozen and the audience in stunned admiration. What unfolded was more than a clash of personalities. It was a testament to courage, preparation, and the power of speaking truth to authority. Her performance reminded viewers that dignity is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and contagious. Now, it's your turn to carry that energy forward. If this moment inspired you, don't let it fade into a scroll. Subscribe to our channel for more electrifying political encounters, viral debates, and stories where courage confronts arrogance head-on. Share this video with friends, family, and your network to spread the message that standing tall matters, and that a voice of integrity can move mountains, even against the most intimidating figures. Join a movement that values truth over power, preparation over bluster, and principle over performance. Comment below with your thoughts on Crockett's masterful response. How would you react if faced with such arrogance? Engage, debate, and amplify the lessons of resilience and moral clarity for everyone watching. Because silence in the face of arrogance isn't defeat. It's the sound of dignity winning. Every click, every share, and every subscription reinforces the idea that courage and truth resonate far beyond a single chamber or debate stage. Together, we can celebrate those who challenge authority with poise, inspire others to speak up, and redefine what leadership looks like in America today. This is more than content. It's a call to action. Stand with those who choose principle, amplify voices of integrity, and remember, moments like this aren't just viral, they're the blueprint for a more accountable, courageous, and inspired society.